I'll take prep time in 30-second intervals, please. In the second affirmative speech, first we'll look at the definitions presented. Does her counter definition stand? Move on to her responses to my case, and finally look at justice as a whole, why that shouldn't be our standard for legitimacy. So let's start off with the definitions. Now, as the affirmative, I have the right to define definitions. That's one of my powers as the affirmative, unless it can be shown that my definition is unfair or has some sort of flaw in it. Now, the only problem she had with my definition is that purpose can lead to something bad. I didn't agree with this. Legitimacy is defined by purpose. It doesn't say it has to be a good purpose. It doesn't say it has to be a bad purpose. That's how legitimacy is defined. There's really been no flaw pointed out, so this definition stands. Well, let's go ahead and look at her definition and if it's really a suitable definition for today's debate round. Now, her definition is a government's legitimacy is the moral right it possesses to be the exclusive imposer of binding duties, and it goes on. Basically, it says, a government has a moral obligation to rule the people, to be the exclusive decision maker in making laws, and to enforce those laws if coercion by possible. And it says to use coercion. Essentially, if a government has the power to rule, it can do whatever it wants because it has the moral obligation to, which basically can lead to tyranny. It's essentially the idea that if a government is in place, it can do whatever it wants. And I don't believe that my opponent would agree that this definition is correct either. So thus we're left with my definition that purpose is, or legitimacy is defined by purpose. That's what the dictionary definition is. That's what stands in today's debate round. Now, most of her responses to my case, moving on down to my case, was simply that because the definition is different, my case no longer stands. With the definition in place, all my arguments go untouched, except one that she brought up, and that was about services. She said that most of the services I'm talking about are just an extension of our rights. They're enhancing our life. They're enhancing our liberty, our property, and that's exactly the point. We're not here just to protect rights. That's not the duty of government. If people are trying to enhance their rights by services that are not rights, such as healthcare, such as the libraries or the national state parks or the highways, these aren't necessarily rights. They're enhancers of our life. That's perfectly acceptable for the people to ask from their government in exchange for some rights. We have to give up some properties, some liberties, in exchange for those services. So that's exactly the point. People can enhance their rights, their life, by sacrificing some rights. And a government can't say, sorry, no, your rights are being maintained, we're ignoring your will. So let's move on down finally to her idea of justice. Now, justice really doesn't work as a standard for today's debate round. First, because we're looking at purpose. Now, I'm not saying justice is a bad thing, but it's not the same thing as legitimacy. Justice is an ideal, it's not the purpose of every single government. Now, her argument is really circular. She says that legitimacy is justice, and justice leads to legitimacy. She then said that individual rights uphold justice. However, she said justice was only good because it upholds rights. So essentially we have rights lead to justice, which lead to rights. It's one big circular argument. If you plug it into the resolution, it would say, resolve that a government's legitimacy, which is defined by justice, which is really just upholding rights, is upheld more by rights. It's one big circular argument. So unless we can see a reason why justice exists or why it should lead to legitimacy outside of rights, this really has no standing in today's round. Now, she talked about the Salem witch trials, and then she said that there really weren't trials for a lot of them, it was just the people deciding to do this, so I'm not sure how this applies to the government. But we'll go ahead and move on down. The last reason I'd like to bring up why we can't just uphold rights, why we have to follow the people, is because rights can be vague. If the government wants to uphold life and it wants to uphold liberty, either of those are pursuing rights. If the government decides that it's going to violate our privacy, our liberty, by wiretapping our homes in order to protect our lives from security threats, or to search without a warrant because it'll be better able to stop crime, they may be infringing upon one right, but they're pursuing rights in general, therefore would be considered legitimate, which is not the case. Thank you very much.
How much prep time do you have remaining? How much prep time?
A minute and 20 seconds.
30 seconds, please. Intervals. Would you mind if I take my please? Ready? All right. In my last speech of today's debate round, I'm going to go over a few arguments that have been presented already, and then show 2 voting issues on why you should vote for me on today's ballot, what you should use to determine by who wins the round. So starting with a few arguments that have been stated, starting with the definitions in particular. She said that I didn't really give a reason why hers is illegitimate. I just said that the purpose could be good and the purpose could be bad. But that's the whole point. The purpose could be good or the purpose could be bad. Very often the purpose is bad with the Japanese Americans, with the Salem witch trials, which I'll go into a little bit later and clarify. The purpose can be anything, and that brings me to one point that she made against my definition. One of them was that, well, this means that the government can do anything, and I'll show how it does in a little bit later, but the fact is, with her definition, the people could do anything. Why is that any better? The people could do anything, the government could do anything. In fact, the government can't do anything because this definition, a government's legitimacy is the complex moral right it possesses to be the exclusive imposer of binding duties on its subjects, to have its subjects comply with these duties, and to use coercion to enforce these duties. In cross-examination, she asked me what the duties are, and I said individual rights. She didn't seem to have a problem with that. So it's all about these duties. The government has to be doing what they do as long as it's in pursuit of duties. They can't do anything they want. It has to be in pursuit of these duties, of individual rights. So really the government can't do anything under this definition. It can do things that protect individual rights, enforce individual rights, and discipline those who do not respect individual rights. It's with her definition that there's an option for someone to do anything, and that is the people. Now, she also said that when I had said that, Russia and Canada, these are all to enhance rights, she said, yes, they're to enhance right. There's extra stuff in there. And yes, there's some extra stuff in there. Rights do have to be given up at times. However, the government is illegitimate if they don't give these rights back, according to my definition, which I think seems to still stand in today's debate round. If the government doesn't give the rights back, then they are illegitimate. But with Russia, they were enforcing security to help their right to life. With Canada, they were enforcing healthcare to also enhance their life. And so these are all in pursuit of rights. Some rights were given up, but they were given back. For example, if I gave you an apple today, chocolate bar. If I gave you a chocolate bar today and said you have to come back and give me 2 chocolate bars tomorrow, I may have lost a chocolate bar for 24 hours, but I get another one later. See, the rights are given back. If you didn't give me my chocolate bars back, then you'd be illegitimate in this area. But it's the same way. It works the same way with governments. I'd like to clarify on the Salem witch trials. She said that since I had said a lot of them weren't trials, she didn't really see how this applied to government. And yes, some of the cases in this some of the people were not given trials. However, a lot of them were. 19 men and women were hanged. So I'm not sure of the exact numbers of who were given trials and who were not, but I do know that there were trials, the government was sitting in on the trials, and the only reason that there weren't trials was because since there was no restriction, since the government was exactly what the people purposed, the people became out of hand and decided, oh, we don't even need trials anymore, let's just hang them, I don't like them. See, this is why governments can become illegitimate under her definition that she's presented, exactly as purpose. This is the problem with her definition of exactly as purpose. It just can't work that way. So my first voting issue has to do under this, that popular sovereignty cannot lead to legitimacy. Popular sovereignty by itself becomes tyrannical with the Japanese Americans, with the Salem witch trials, with anywhere where the power only rests with the people and where these people aren't going toward individual rights, aren't respecting individual rights, the government is illegitimate. They're letting the people do anything they want. Suppose I have a little brother and his name is Sammy. He's 4 years old. Now suppose my family wanted to go do something. It was like, all right, Sammy, we're gonna all go watch a movie. You have a free reign over all the house. Do whatever you want. Well, I certainly hope that I wouldn't come back to the house, find my room a wreck, and Sammy with candy and sugar all over his face and with a Mountain Dew in his hand. He had free reign. He could do whatever he wanted.